Stephen, welcome to the Virtual CMO Podcast. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you've got kind of an interesting story, right? You're 31 years old. It sounds like you got involved with a business that ended up being acquired.
It was.
Probably made some nice coin off that particular acquisition. Tell me about that whole story and that whole experience.
Yeah, so I had kind of cut my teeth in my career at KPMG. It's where I got my start, and spent a couple of years there and transitioned to lead business development at a small healthcare software company. And really thrived in an environment where I had to wear multiple hats. There was no process, figure it out. They just hired a new VP of marketing at the same time. And so we just kind of went like gangbusters, and we're a team, small little 2-person team, and just did what we wanted, really. And I think there were 12 people at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so that company had been around for 10 years, and it was serving the senior living market. And over the next 2.5 to 3 years, we doubled revenue from what it had grown to over 10 years. And it was a blast. And the company was acquired. And I'll say my compensation was aligned with the owner's interests, is how I'll phrase that as it relates to the exit and everything like that. And just really, I call that my MBA. I didn't go get an MBA. That really was my MBA, and got to participate in all sorts of different marketing campaigns, product development. We didn't really have a product manager, so I was baptized in software, product management, product development, and led sales and was involved in marketing. So just kind of did a lot, and it was incredible. We had a great run, and I was there nearly 5 years.
That is a great run, especially if you were able to cash out at such an early age, and gives you the ability to do things now. So I'm curious, I know it's probably a more involved story than just a quick answer, but if you think back to that time and you said it started to go like gangbusters, can you look back and say there's one thing that we did that really turned the tide, that really got the momentum going?
There's 2 things really
Okay,
specifically.
great.
So one was we decided to publish pricing on our website, which for that industry at that time, which was in 2013, was unheard of. People held pricing close to the chest, lots of special deals with the big companies. We decided to control the pricing conversation, publish our pricing online, and just shout from the rooftops, we don't do special deals. We don't care how big you are. And we did that with the most competitive pricing in the market for what we were doing. Which was real-time analytics on clinical data for these companies. And what that did is it really disrupted the market. And we became we were efficient. I think that from a technology perspective, we were the most advanced, especially at that time. So we were able to undercut some of our competition and still maintain great margins and publish our pricing. So we said, this is the price. We can operate at a great kind of margin and still grow effectively. And so we did that. So that was one, kind of controlling that pricing conversation and disrupting from that perspective. The other was, I just like the general thought of arbitrage and technology arbitrage and design arbitrage. So when you take functionality and design that's familiar in consumer web, like Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, right? And you bring that to nurses, they feel special. And no one else had really done that in the industry at that time to make, the user interfaces beautiful and really high quality design and, caring about UI, UX and all these things, right? All the competitors were just functional. So those 2 things really was what sent us on that meteoric growth.
So interesting to me, because I think that whole consumerization of software has done a lot for many companies, especially a lot of these software as a service companies or these app developers. When you can make something that's easy to use, friendly, and familiar, people will gravitate toward it. I was talking on an episode or 2 ago, we were talking about the Robinhood trading platform and how that has just taken off. And one of the reasons is because it feels very fun and familiar to a lot of younger users who are getting involved in buying and selling stocks for the first time.
No doubt. Yep, I totally agree. That's like perfect example.
So now you're on this mission. You want to start 50 companies by 2050. Where did this come from?
Yeah. So originally, kind of my father, I grew up in a household where he had a full-time job. He also had a for-profit company and a nonprofit organization all at the same time. So I grew up in this reality of that being normal. And he was busy, but he spent a lot of time with their family. So I just thought that everyone did that, or thought it was unusual if you didn't do that. So even when I was in college and going to KPMG, I just had this expectation that I would end up being involved in several businesses and different ventures. And I always had that vision for myself. It just took time to learn what I needed to learn, go through that quote unquote MBA process for 5 years at that software company, come out on the other end feeling really comfortable doing that and operating. So, 50 by 2050, part of it is to be self-motivating for myself and to also let other people connect with me and kind of, um, I get a lot of inbound interest on that. It feels like this, people say BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, something that you can kind of attach to, sink your teeth into and say, what's that all about? So it's a great conversation starter. And ultimately, I like bringing other people along with me for the ride. I look for operators for businesses so that I don't have to try to run everything myself and keep all the equity for myself. I like, you know, bringing others along with me for the ride and helping other people start their entrepreneurial journey.
So how far along are you in the 50?
Yeah. Point of clarification. Some of the deals that I do are more closely knit revenue share deals versus true equity. I kind of count those because I'm really involved in that business and care deeply about it. And those are long-term arrangements. So I count those. So if you include that, I'm at 6. And 6 and counting. We may talk about a new business I'm involved in later that would be 7. So just having a blast, and that's going well. And long term, hope to continue to build more service companies that service the rest of the portfolio. Kind of started with a marketing agency that made sense to me. Looking at a bookkeeping company, so you kind of get that idea of these service companies that can serve generally most companies. So continuing to explore that model.
Generally, when there's a conversation about startups, there are kind of two schools of thought. One is, let's build it as fast as we can so we can exit and make some money. And the other is, we're going to build something for long-term sustainable growth.
That's correct.
Where are you in sort of that spectrum? Is there a place for both in your portfolio, or are you focused more on one than the other?
I'm very focused on build and hold. Very focused on that. Would sell, very open to selling, but not focused on that. I never hope to IPO a company. I don't want, a ton of stakeholders. I like keeping things simple. I think there's a healthy version of wanting control, right? So control can be this negative thing that, we want to control the scenario and situations around us. But there's a healthy version of that where you know what you want and you want to try to maintain that. And so that's where I'm at. I want to maintain my lifestyle, limiting my travel and things like that, right? And just all the reporting. I have no desire to take a company public. So
A lot of
definitely
work.
focused on the build and hold.
I think that people who have a mindset to build a business or to grow a business, oftentimes they have a nose for business. They can sniff out good ideas. They can sniff out products or services that have a place in the market where they can grow, where they've got runway to develop and capture some market share. So I'm sure you're pitched a lot of ideas to say, hey, this
Mhm.
would make a great company. This would make a great
Yep.
product or service. What excites you about an idea of a product or a service?
I would say where I'm at now, I really want to see that there's a proven market for something already for the most part. So if I start a bookkeeping company, right, I know that that's a proven market and we can niche down on that. We can do something better than the next guy or gal. Um, so that's part of the equation for me. I'm not necessarily looking for, at, artificial intelligence, robotics, blah. That's all great. It's sexy, but I really get excited about proven markets and doing something with focus and niching down. I like that route more. And then on top of that, I would say when someone brings me an idea, I'm very interested in being profitable quickly. So if someone says, "Hey, I'm going to have to raise money from day one," or I need 18 months of runway, or I need, I just don't like to start there. Right? I say, "Hey, how is this company going to be profitable 90 days in?" That I like to take that approach. And that doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for every business. Also, some businesses are inherently just way more capital intense, right? And so um, that's another point: is things that get me excited or things that can remain fairly lean. So I like that. I lean towards that.
When I talk to a lot of startup founders, one thing that I tend to see in them is that they feel that their idea is so unique, so special, that
Yep.
there is obviously a market for it because they have come up with some kind of unique secret sauce. But when
Yes.
I look at a lot of these ideas, I say, no, they're just a variation of something that already exists. It seems like there are very few truly new and revolutionary products or services out there in the market. And obviously, some of those do gangbusters if they're under the right management, right? But do you
Totally.
sort of agree with that, that most things are just a variation of something that's already there?
I do. There's a few different buckets. You've correctly identified one of them, where they have this false sense of individuality and kind of uniqueness. Then it's not true. Also, if it actually is what they think it is, and it is extremely unique, I'm not necessarily excited. So because there's an unproven market, right? And it could be incredible, right? If it's Elon Musk 20 years ago, I'd love to bet on that. I wish I could, rewind history and go bet on Elon, right? But for the most part, those fail. There's a place for them, and there are people with capital that are willing to take those big gambles on things like that, which is exciting. It's not for me necessarily, but it's fun to watch from the sidelines, at times. So
Absolutely. Yeah, Elon is a great example, right? But even that, he wasn't the first person with an electric car, right? I think General
sure,
Motors was the first one to release an electric car in the States. So it's just a variation, I bet a good one. And he's certainly seen some payback for that. So when you look at other startups and businesses that are out there, is there something that you see as a common trait as to why they fail? You talked about profitability in the first 90 days.
mhm,
Profitability is obviously a reason that a lot of them fail. But do you see
sure,
some things when you evaluate businesses?
yeah. Just the common themes of failure. I would say that a lot of times when you have co-founders that started off and they never really were aligned, that's a very common point of failure. Um, there's a guy that I really like in the marketing space named Ryan Stewart. He was talking about an agency that had failed of his, and that was his first failure was having to do with a company where his co-founder and he didn't actually ever see eye to eye, and they got sideways 8 months in, and it all fell apart. Super common, very common. Another is just a lack of financial oversight in general. So financial management, just like in your own personal life, a lot of people get on hard times because they might be making $250,000 a year, but they never actually looked at their own finances and they were just spending. Right? Same thing in business. People get in trouble when they don't really have solid financial oversight. Um, and then another thing that comes to mind really quickly is that there was poor validation on the front end. There was a lot of assumptions made, very little, if any, validation or testing, and just decided to jump in full throttle, spending money. We got a website, we got our Instagram handle, we're doing all these things, but you never actually validated that the dog wanted the food, and that's a big problem that's super common.
You talked about liking to get into established businesses where you don't really have to prove that there is a market for a product or service.
Mhm.
One of the things that I've seen with a lot of clients that I work with is that they get into a market where there's very strong competition. And instead of picking something off to the left or right or figuring out a specific niche to go after within that broader market, they go head to head against a strong competitor. And that is
Right.
really hard to do and be successful at it. What's your advice when you're talking to a small business or you're working with a small business and how they deal with their competitors? How do they find their space?
Yeah. Easy, quick answer is, what's your competitive advantage? because if you're going to go head to head in a highly competitive space, you have to have some sort of competitive advantage. There's a lot of different options, right? There's a lot of different possibilities for that competitive advantage. There's some, um, proprietary source of deal flow, or you've locked down some important partnership with someone, or you're that much better at some sort of strategy than the next guy, right? Um, but if you're going to go into a market that's deeply competitive and you just are planning on running a good business and that's it, and that's all you kind of have, probably going to fail or really struggle if you don't have some sort of very specific competitive advantage early on.
What's so interesting to me about the way you answered that question is you didn't say ours is priced better or we've got better features. Our product is better.
No, because
Yours was all around process, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Price moves around. There's so many external factors that can influence our pricing as business owners. So I think if you try to go in and compete on price, that may work for a season, but it's really unlikely to work long term. Features, people can copycat you. There is a place for people that can just outpace the competition. So they get so far ahead that it's hard to catch up. I think you've seen that with Stripe as a business over the long haul. A lot of imitators, but they just always are 2 to 3 major steps ahead. And the ecosystem they built's incredible. And there are some companies that try to take market share in certain pieces of their business, but no one has been able to really keep up. That's an example of a business that, they could lead with features, but just outpace. So, yeah, I think that's correct in the way you assess that.
What do you think the secret is to working with partners? I completely agree that partnerships can help scale a business when you don't have the ability to add staff or salespeople. If you get partners selling on your behalf, that can be a huge advantage. But I've also seen that a lot of companies, they're sort of waiting for the first side to blink, right?
Sure.
Well, you give us a lead and we'll push you as a partner, this kind of thing. And neither one wants to take the first step. And so nothing ever happens.
Yep. Classic. It's kind of like a different version of chicken or the egg, right?
Right.
So, if that is a partnership, so company A sees company B as super valuable as a partner, and they would love to partner with company B. Company A should be willing to take the first step to create value for company B proactively, even if there's no contract. Get that lead, right? Do something of value. You even see this on Twitter with people that are trying to grow their followings and audiences, is that people will prop up other people that are a little larger than them, maybe in the same arena, to try to get notoriety and grow their own following, right? So that's a very informal sort of partnership, right? It's like a social contract. But yeah, I would say that the company that is more reliant on the partnership for growth should be the one that is maybe a little uncomfortable and create some value that may return void, but it's a risk that they should take.
It's not that different than a strategy that you would have around marketing or customer service or just your company in general. You want to give value before there's any expectation of anything in return, because it will come back to you, but you
Yeah.
can't go in with the expectation that I'm going to do this in order to get that.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So partnerships have been key to the companies that you've built or work with in terms of its scale and growth.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with strategic partnerships. There's all sorts of different types of partners, right? You could go down the path of talking about affiliates and things like that. That's a little different. But true strategic partnerships are fascinating to me. I've been involved in ones that never really created value, and I've been involved in partnerships that are immensely impactful and really move the needle in a business. And I think what you're looking for is 2 main things. One is the mutual willingness to serve one another, and then 2 is the mutual gain, right? So you're both willing and you both gain close to the same amount. Like there's not this awkwardness to the relationship where that the other company is really getting like 80% of the benefit and you're getting kind of 20, right? When it comes down to it, just think gross revenue or something like that. So that's tricky when that's the case. But if those two things aren't present, the willingness and kind of the mutual gain, probably not going to go very well.
When you're building out a business, obviously you have to bring in people that you know and trust, that you can help support the business, run the business. So when you're looking to hire people, do you think it's most important to hire people on a cultural fit, being in sync with your vision of the company, or for their skills and experience?
I think that depends on the company. And I won't just leave you with it depends, but it depends on the company, right? So if the business and this person that I'm hiring is going to operate the business, and that business is very, very skill centric, then it has to be more focused on their skills and abilities, I think, and less on culture, because it doesn't matter how great of a cultural fit they are if they can't execute the work. If it's not as much like that, then I would lean the opposite way and say it's more about culture fit if we're not as focused about skill and execution of some specific thing necessarily that is requires a lot of upskilling to be able to operate at like an efficient level. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So, does culture come into consideration as you're building out these companies, as you're thinking about what these companies are going to be? Where does culture fit in sort of your thinking as
Yeah.
you get these companies up and running?
And so a lot of what I do is one or two other partners where we're starting a business. There's other times where it's a revenue share deal with an existing company. They're doing 7 figures of revenue already, and I'm coming in kind of playing growth mechanism, that sort of thing. If I'm starting a business, I really want to be aligned. Culture and mindset are kind of two different things. I
Yeah.
really mostly want to be aligned on mindset, that we are thinking about this business. We're thinking about the purpose of the business. We both understand, or the three of us understand, the level of priority this business will take in our lives, that sort of thing, right? How do we think about the world? Do we all hope to sell the company in 4 years, or do we hope to hold it for quite some time? And if those are different, maybe one person wants to sell it as fast as possible and get some financial pop. With someone like me, that's a problem. It's really not my goal. So it's more about mindset for me when I'm starting a new business than culture. Uh, you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair to separate those two,
I
culture and
do.
mindset?
I do. I think they're interwoven in some respects, but culture takes time to really establish. But
Exactly.
part of culture is having people with the similar mindset. Because if you
hmm
have people who think drastically different than you do, that's a recipe for disaster right out of the gate.
And I'll and there's phases to that, right? So with the marketing agency that I have, my business partner and I were very aligned on mindset early on, still are. He's great. As that business has grown, we have shifted as we onboard new team members to being more focused on culture fit, so that they don't cause disruption on the team, that sort of thing. So there's phases and like a life cycle of all that. And you're right that it is intertwined.
Yeah. So I'm kind of interested. You're here on this podcast today. Obviously, you understand the power of a personal brand
Mhm.
and being able to get your name and your face out there. How important do you think that is for executives in a company, for a founder of a company, to really have a personal presence, to have their personal brand so that they can also associate that with their company brand?
I think it's crucial. 10 out of 10, I would advise anyone to, whatever they're doing today, enhance it. If they're doing nothing, just get off the bench, get in the game. I just had a conversation with the vice president of a regional bank yesterday, and I said, how many people in your industry are doing really incredible personal branding? They're thought leaders, they're putting out thoughtful content for their audience. He said, I have over 300 or 400 contacts that are just in banking. I can't think of one person that does that. So there's a huge need for people to see the benefit, right? And there's a lot of people that just aren't in the game at all. So whether you work at a bank or a software company, or you own, an e-commerce business, it doesn't matter to me. You could be you could work at a random insurance company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for all I care. I think everyone should be building their own personal brand. And, let's be honest, most people don't stay at a company forever now. So, Kathy that works at the insurance company, who's a assistant VP of whatever, maybe she gets let go, or maybe she realizes she needs to move on in her career. And if she would have been building that personal brand, that could affect her future compensation at a new job. For a business owner, it could lead to new revenue, new partnerships. I mean, so I think it's important for people to just get in the game. And if they're already in the game, but just kind of doing it intermittently, I'd say consistency then becomes the game.
It's definitely an important element in your overall marketing strategy as a way to build awareness. And, one of the things that I've seen too with younger companies, with startups, is that they can often fall into this trap where it's build, 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 right? They want to focus on building out whatever they're trying to make or produce, or the company itself. And they postpone marketing because marketing is viewed as an expense until things get in place. And my guess is that you view that differently, especially if you're looking at being profitable within 90 days. You've got to do some marketing, you've got to do some lead generation, you've got to make some sales happen, right? So what's your view on marketing and startups?
There's tiers of that as it relates to the cost. And you also have to know what you're building, right? It does depend whether it's an e-commerce business or a software business or some service related company. So I use the phrase ALAP a lot, which is as lean as possible. So I think early on in a business, for many businesses, you can do very effective marketing for pretty cheap. I don't like the word cheap, but just an affordable marketing strategy, and then grow spend as you're able to. But I do think it's important to have some marketing budget early on. But again, there's so many ways to be very cost efficient in marketing today that I don't like the excuse that someone says, well, we don't have any budget. That's okay. I can give you the first 10 activities that are free to go do right now to market your business. So I think some people hide behind excuses around, capital and budget as it relates to marketing for startups.
So you started a marketing agency. Is that a route that you would recommend businesses take? Is, especially in the early stages, outsource their marketing to an agency rather than hiring people until you get some scale?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously decreases overhead. You don't have someone on the payroll. It's more flexible in terms of spend in most arrangements. And you can have someone that's maybe part-time, instead of this big FTE cost and benefits, or compensating someone just in that sort of salaried role or something like that. So I do think that that's a good route to take for many businesses. Um, Maybe in certain industries, having an actual full-time CMO, that level of ability internal, could be justified. But in most cases, I would say that's probably not true early on. First 12 months, especially 24 months, maybe even. Um, I kind of push people towards an outsourced, CMO or outsourced marketing activities, so that they can really operate the business and focus on growth. But um, some of that comes down to industry.
Well, I love that at the Five Echelon Group, my company. That's exactly what we do, is outsource CMO services. And many of our clients are smaller businesses, startups that don't have a large marketing organization. So we're completely on board with what you're saying there. So you alluded to it earlier in the podcast, but you recently started up a new business. Tell us a little bit about your latest venture.
Yeah, it's called Internet Exits. So internetexits.com. And I'm really excited about it. There are other platforms that are similar. A lot of those blast you with 100 different companies that are for sale, and just some of them are gimmicky. We really are trying to take more of a matchmaking, kind of high touch approach to that business. And we have some exciting things that are kind of differentiating as well. One of them I'll talk about is an operator as a service. So some people may want to buy a small digital business for cash flow, but they don't actually have time to run it. And so we will be offering an operator as a service on that platform as well, which is pretty unique in that
Yeah, that's
industry.
very
So,
unique. Yeah.
yeah, I'm really excited about that. We've gotten a lot of really great early feedback, so would love for people to check that out.
That's great. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes so that people can find it. And I know that you're a podcaster yourself. Talk to me a little bit about your show, Betafy. Is that correct?
Yes, Betafy. Yeah, so Betafy is a platform that likes to highlight companies that we almost call it pre-product hunt. So, it's really early on, alpha, just getting feedback. There's over 5,000 companies on the platform, and it's a fun community. And the podcast is really to service those people that are just starting out. A lot of the people on Betafy are technical. They're more like a technical co-founder. They're software developers, but they don't have as much business experience. And so we really try to bring in some of the gotchas and strategy and things like that on our podcast.
I think that's great. And you clearly have a lot of balls in the air at any one time. And it sounds like you're doing some exciting things with the new company. And you've still got, what, 46 more to go?
Yeah, something like
44
that.
more to go? Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if it happens. It's a good goal, and it keeps me excited every day.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, you've got to set those big long-term goals, something to shoot for.
Yeah.
Hey, Stephen, I've really enjoyed having you on the podcast today. We've covered some really interesting things, and I think some of the advice and tips that you've shared with the audience are really applicable to the stage they're at in their business. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.